What if I told you in the next 10 minutes, you'll see how I solved a real problem I was facing with my newsletter workflow, and you'll learn exactly how to build your own MCP server in Java to solve yours. My name is Dan Vega, and like many of you, I've been experimenting with Claude's new model context protocol. But here's the thing, most of the tutorials that we go through are simple examples that don't solve real-world problems. Today, I'm going to show you an actual MCP server I built for my own workflow. All right, so we are going to jump over here again. You probably noticed by the title of this video, I built an MCP server for something called Beehive. Now, Beehive is where I manage all of my newsletters. So I currently have two publications, one for Dan Vega over at danvega.dev and one for my bite-sized AI newsletter. And I'll leave links to both of those in the description below. But we're going to focus on this today, and I want to talk through the problem that I solved. And one of those kind of pain points that I had that over and over again, I was like, I gotta find a better solution for this. And then we'll walk through kind of the code and how I put the MCP server together. All right, so this is Beehive. You can find out more at beehive.com. I'll just quickly go over to the dashboard here. You can see for Dan Vega, I have a bunch of newsletters in here. And I can go ahead and start a new newsletter. So I can go in and use a template. I usually use templates. So I have my templates. And this is my newsletter template. And so I can just go ahead and use template. And then I can start writing. Now on the Beehive, on the bite-sized AI side, I write my newsletters in here. I push them to my newsletter email list and I publish them on the web. On the Dan Vega side, I already have a website. So I use the Beehive editor because I really like the writing experience in here. And I send these emails out to the email newsletter. When I want to go ahead and publish them to the website, that's where things got a little bit tricky. But let me show you kind of the authoring experience first. So I come in here and I have this kind of template. I can come in here and add like a video or an image. Let's see if we can go ahead and add an image. So I'll upload one. And I'll go ahead and choose this one. I think this was an image from, where are we at? This was Java 1, right? So let's go ahead. I'm also going to pop over to YouTube and I'll grab the latest video here. So let's go ahead and get the shareable link. And then we'll go ahead and paste this in here and it does like an embed. What I really like about this experience is you're going to send a newsletter out. I have things like code and images and YouTubes and tweets that I got to embed. And it does all that formatting for me. So this is cool. Now the problem with this is, if we go over to danvega.dev, I have a place on my website to show the last few newsletters. And then if you want to go ahead and subscribe to the newsletter, you can do that here. But if you go into this and you look at this, this is going to be on my personal website, which is written in Vue, in Nuxt, and I have components for rendering everything like images, YouTube videos, tweet embeds, all the things you would expect in like some type of blog post or newsletter. I have components to do that. So what I have to do, or what I used to have to do, is I used to have to take all of the content from the newsletter and somehow turn that into markdown. And not just any markdown, like very specific markdown that I needed on my website to display the newsletter. As you can imagine, the more times you start doing these things, some light bulbs should go off in your head. Like, I need to automate this. So I found different ways to kind of automate it, but it was never really easy. And that's when I decided to sit down and write an MCP server that would connect to the Beehive API and allow me to do all the things. Like, I just want to connect this to like some type of MCP client and say, hey, grab the latest newsletter post that's in draft and go ahead and take that content and turn it into the very specific markdown that I need. And I can do that via like a Claude project with some system instructions on how to take that and turn that into what I'm looking for. So that's what I'm going to show you today. We're not going to write any code together, but I'm going to show off a lot of code. So if you want to find out more about the MCP server, you can go to github.com/danvega/beehive MCP server. There's a whole README there, but we'll go through the kind of code today. So I think one of the biggest things that I've seen out there is like, why don't we just use APIs, right? Like, why don't we just, if there's a Beehive REST API, why did we introduce this whole MCP protocol thing? So for me, MCP servers do a specific set of instructions. Whereas like it's not always a one-to-one mapping with the entire API. I don't need all the functionality of the API. This MCP server is not going to use all of the functionality. It may in the future, but right now it doesn't need to do that, right? What I need to know are publications. So which newsletter am I working with? I need to be able to get posts. And I even just added subscriptions in there. So if I can ask questions about the subscribers I have on my newsletters. So we start with posts. If you go under posts, we have a post service. MCP servers start with, actually we'll back up because I see one that we can talk about already, which is the REST client config. So I have this REST client config, which will configure a REST client for any component that needs to talk to the Beehive API server. So this, we go ahead and load our configuration. We add an API key that comes from our configuration, and we set up this REST client. So now when I need a REST client, I can just ask for it. And then I have a bunch of different tools. If you are brand new to MCP, this probably isn't the best video to get started with if you want to write your own code. I have a couple of videos that I've done, and we even talked about it in my full Spring AI course. So I'll leave some links to those in the description below. But what we're doing here is we're providing tools to the large language model. So we say, hey, here's a tool. The name of it is Beehive Get Posts. And what it does is it gets posts from a Beehive newsletter with comprehensive filtering options. So when you ask a question to an MCP client like Claude Desktop, say, hey, give me all the posts for my Beehive newsletter, it's going to say, I don't know how to do that, but wait a minute, I see you've defined a tool that may be able to help us with that. Let me go ahead and send this back to you. You call that tool, send me the information, and then I'll probably have the context that I need to answer that question. So we have things for like getting a post or getting all posts, Beehive get a post. And then I think there's a bunch of just helper methods. Get by status, get by platform, get by tag. So all these different ways to kind of filter stuff. So that's the big thing. So we can get posts, we can get publication, we can get subscriptions. And if we look at our properties, we have a publication ID and a Beehive API. These we will configure once we kind of load this into an MCP client, and I'll show you that in a minute. You could set some defaults here if you wanted to, but I'm basically setting a default publication ID in the MCP client settings so that if I don't say a specific publication, then it just uses that one. So we have some MCP settings. There are different types of transports. So STDIO is standard in and out. There's also SSE, so server-sent events, if you want to stand up a server. There's also a third one in the specification, but we don't support that yet. But that, I believe, is coming soon. And then you need to do a couple of things. You need to set the banner mode off because we don't want any of the logging going to the console because it kind of screws up what's happening in the MCP server. So there's some properties. There's a post service. I'll mention one more thing before we get into it. There's also a way to build native images. So I have a GitHub workflow action here. We'll show you this on the GitHub side in a second, but this allows me to build native images for macOS, Windows, and Linux. So if somebody is watching this and they don't know Java and they don't want to run like java-jar and then the uber jar that you need to run, then you can just kind of download one of the native images and run that without having to use Java. So as I said, once you're done kind of developing, what happens is you build an uber jar. So you just kind of MVN, or in this case, MVN clean package. And what happens is you get a jar out of this. So I have a specific version 0.0.3 snapshot.jar. You would copy the path to that. And then whatever MCP client you're going to install it in, that's the kind of path that you need to know. So in my case, if I wanted to use Claude Desktop, this is an MCP client. This is the desktop version of Claude on the web. And I wanted to install an MCP server. I can go up to Claude and settings. If I go into developer, we'll see the extensions that I have loaded in. Beehive is one of those already. We can see the command. But if I needed to edit the configuration options, I can go in here and open up this file. I'll go ahead and open this up with Visual Studio Code. And then you can see this is in the README. This is something you could just paste into your configuration file. So the command I'm giving it is Java. I don't know why, but I have to give it a fully qualified path to Java here. And then I give it some arguments. So I'm running -jar and then the location of the jar that I'm going to run. Again, if you're not a Java user, that's okay. There are some instructions in there on how to run the native image. So you don't need Java installed to go ahead and run this MCP server locally. They're also doing some interesting things over at Anthropic. They have a way to kind of package these up as extensions and then do kind of one-click installs. So we'll probably do a video on that soon and see if we can't kind of incorporate this one into there. And then we set some environment variables. I'm not going to show you those because that has my API key and my publication ID, but those are in the documentation. You set those. And once this is set and then the configuration is reloaded, you can go into Claude and you can see down here in your MCP servers that you have Beehive and you have all these different available tools. And so now what this does, it allows us to kind of just talk with the MCP server and get some information. So before I even kind of show you my workflow, we can just talk to the MCP server. So how many publications do I have on Beehive? So again, how many newsletters do I have? And because of this integration, it's going to notice that it needs to call a tool, send something back and says, okay, I need to list all publications. And it says you have 2 publications, Dan Vega and Bite-Sized AI. Can you give me the last 3 posts for each publication? Right? And so this is why I kind of built this in here to take publication IDs, because now it's going to basically make 2 calls to the API. Based on the publication ID for each, it's going to get all the posts, and it does some filtering. So we can get the last 3 posts for each publication, and then it will go ahead and list those out. So anything that's available as far as a tool goes, and this is some really good information, by the way. It not only just gives you the name, but it tells you kind of when it was published, platform, status, etc. So I can do a whole bunch of interactions with anything that's available as a tool in the Beehive MCP server. So I can even create subscriptions if I wanted to add new subscriptions, if I wanted to find particular email to see if it was in a publication, I can do that. So this is kind of step 1. This just allows me to interact with my Beehive API through an MCP server to do some simple kind of querying like this. Now, even if I wanted to say, hey, give me all the posts and give me these fields, and then export them to JSON or export them to CSV. Again, this is why we have MCP servers, to integrate with large language models so that we can do some generation of things that we need. So any kind of get creative here, anything you want to do with the content you now have available to you from the Beehive API is really unlimited, right? So you can do a whole bunch of cool things. So that's one part of this, being able to do that. The second part of this is being able to solve my workflow problem. How can I take what was in draft status and turn that into the actual markdown that I need to publish this to my website? All right, so I'm back over on this post. Let's kind of fill this out just a little bit to see this example all the way through. So let's say Spring AI course and Java 1. Right? And so we have some text here. I might have a heading here for Spring AI course has been released, right? So I might do something like that and have some text here. And then we might have another heading, Java 1 photos, right? And then text here. So this might be what a typical newsletter may look like. Ooh, let's just grab a tweet. So here's one about Dev2 Next coming up. Let's go ahead and pop this in here. And so this embeds the tweet. And then again, this works good, but we want to turn this into Markdown that I can use on my website. So we have something here. So let's now pop over to Claude Code again. And I want to just kind of look at the tools that are here. Another MCP server that I have installed is the file system and MCP server. And this allows me access to be able to read and write files to my file system. So I want to take a look at the other component of this. Now we could come in here and type this out and say exactly what we need this to do, but you wouldn't want to do that every time. So we have a project for this. If we go into projects and we look at the newsletter publishing one, we have some custom instructions here. So we have the role. I always like assigning a role to this. You are an expert content automation assistant specializing in converting Dan Vega's technical newsletter from Beehive to his personal website. We go into some target audience, the content characteristics, the quality standards. And then what are we going to do? We're going to use the file system to write files to disk. We're going to do grammar and spell checking. We want to use today's date for the directory structure because usually when I'm ready to go, I will do it on Monday morning and go ahead and push this out. We got to save all the images. We got to validate these things. Here's where it goes into like the post stuff. Like here's how I create the post and then the automation flow. And then, hey, I think down here, we define like the directory structure, what the YAML header looks like, spelling, grammar, consistency, creating directories, media embed. So when you come across a YouTube video, I need you to use this component that I have. When you use a Twitter embed, I want you to use this component. There's a advertisement that I will send out to like the email. I don't want that on the website, so I pull that ad out of that. So there's a whole bunch of things here, and I've iterated on this. This is not perfect the first time, but come up with some plans, use something like Claude or OpenAI or Gemini to help you write this prompt. But once you get it dialed in, you want to save these system instructions. And that is because when we go to a new chat here, let's close this. No, so let's go home. And what I want to do in here is I want to use a project. So I'll use this newsletter publishing. And then I also have access to the file system and the Beehive MCP server. So now I can do a whole bunch of cool things. So now what I want to do is say, can you grab the latest draft? And I don't have to say Dan Vega because that is the default publication ID. So can you grab the latest draft from Beehive and create the file in markdown for my website. All right, so now what it's going to do, it's going to go through and it's going to say, okay, I got to get the latest draft from Beehive. So I'm using that MCP server. So it looks for a status of draft. It's not published yet. Great, I found one. Spring AI course and Java 1. Oh, it was interrupted. So you'll have that once in a while. Let's see if it keeps going or if we just need to. All right, so can you grab the latest draft? So I'm saying draft and not post, like so it knows like, hey, I got to go get a draft. I don't want to get a published post. I want to get the latest draft from Beehive and turn it into Markdown and create the file on my website. And my website's running locally, so we'll go ahead and hit that. So the first thing it's going to do, okay, I got to get the latest draft. Let me find that. So Beehive, get current publication. It found that one. I found a draft of one. Great. Let's go ahead and get that. It's titled Spring AI Course in Java 1. That's the one that we just created. So now it's going to call the tool get posts because it has a post ID. It can get all of the content for it. Now I need to convert this HTML content into the clean markdown format. Let me check what directories are available from your website. So list of directories, that is where I want that saved. And then it goes off and it creates the YAML header that it needs. It goes off and creates all of the content for this. So here's the H2 text, here's an image. That's not actually an image, it's a component, right? But you can see it goes through and does this. And then what it'll do is says, okay, now let me go ahead and create the markdown file in your newsletter directory. So here is the directory where I need it. So newsletter, Spring AI course, content, retrieved your latest, converted the HTML, created the file. Now I see that it's not in the right directory. Probably needs to be in a directory with the date. So I have it like 2025 7, 1, etc. Now you can edit the placeholder text here. But again, that is the workflow that we go through to kind of take everything from the Beehive draft and then publish that. Well, not publish. We're actually just writing a markdown file locally. And then I'll still go over into my local project and just double check that. I'll probably tweak a couple things. If something didn't go correct, like here, I have to move it into a directory. But for the most part, it will write the images. It'll write the markdown how I need it. This used to be a very manual process. And now, thanks to the ability to have MCP servers, and again, this is not just, I'm trying to like make sure we understand that this is not like, yes, I could have wrote some kind of script that used the Beehive API, pulled that content down, and then like done all of this manually. But I'm putting that hard work on the LLM. Like, it's very good at generating content. It knows that like I have this content, I need to turn it into this content, then I need to run a spell checker, and then I need to move images. Like, we're starting to chain all of these things together. And that's not something I want to do in a scripting environment, right? I am giving an LLM the tools that it needs to perform this task. And this could get much more complicated. Like, we could do a bunch more things with this, but this is really kind of the foundation of this. So I think I really just wanted to kind of show this off as kind of a real world use case for MCP servers. I have been using a lot more MCP servers lately. There's directories out there. You can tie it into Git. So even if I wanted to do this, and then my next step, I could say in my instructions, once you've reviewed it and everything looks okay, go ahead and submit a pull request or just commit it, right? So we'd probably want this in a branch, because once I commit to my website, once I push it to that, it'll actually run a build for it. So maybe I want to do this in a branch and commit that. Then I can go ahead and take a look at this like in a preview branch on my website before I ultimately move that into main, and this shows up on the website. But yeah, just thought I would show this off. A pretty cool use case for MCP for me. Been having a lot of fun building MCP servers, and I'd like to share more with you. What do you want to know about MCP servers, building MCP servers, using them? I'd love to build some more content around that. So hopefully you found this interesting. If you did, you know what to do, friends. Do me a big favor. Leave me a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. And as always, happy coding.